The Emerald Legacy. A ring, a secret, and a family. Reborn, imagine a world where everything you thought you knew about love, loss, and family is turned upside down by a single, breathtaking moment. What if the past isn't truly gone, but merely waiting for the right spark to ignite a hidden truth? Get ready for a story that proves destiny has a way of weaving lives together, even across decades of silence. Have you ever encountered a stranger who felt instantly familiar, as if you'd known them forever? Tell us about that surprising connection in the comments below. And if this tale touches your heart, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Chapter 1. The Ring and the Revelation. Ethan Vance never thought a simple business dinner in London would change his entire life forever. It was November 2024. Exactly 2 years since he had founded his luxury winery and vineyard empire, and 23 years since he had lost the only woman he had truly loved. But that night, sitting alone in the elegant The Gilded Vine restaurant in the heart of Mayfair, he had no idea that the past was about to collide with the present in the most impossible way. The restaurant was one of his favorites when he visited London for meetings with European distributors. The dim lighting, the ancient stone walls, and the intimate atmosphere reminded him of the family vineyards of his youth, before money and success transformed his life into something he sometimes didn't recognize. He had arrived early for his appointment with a French importer, but the man had canceled at the last minute, leaving Ethan dining alone at a table for 2. At 54, Ethan had learned to enjoy solitude. His graying temples gave him a distinguished air that women found attractive, but he had built walls so high around his heart that few managed to truly get close. Since Amelia's death 23 years ago, he had had a few relationships, but none had managed to fill the void she had left. As he cut the sirloin steak he had ordered, Ethan unconsciously twisted the ring on the ring finger of his right hand. It was a habit he had developed during years of stress and loneliness. The ring was a 200-year-old family heirloom, white gold with a perfect Colombian emerald, surrounded by small diamonds. It had belonged to his great-grandfather, then his grandfather, then his father, and finally it had come to him. But most importantly, it was the ring with which he had proposed to Amelia. The ring was unique. His grandfather had told him that only 3 existed in the world, created by an Italian jeweler for a Spanish noble family. In the 19th century. One had disappeared during the Civil War, another had been stolen decades ago, and the third was the one he wore. When Amelia died in that terrible road accident, Ethan had considered burying the ring with her, but in the end, he decided to always wear it as a way to keep her close to his heart. Life had gone on after the tragedy, but it had never been the same. Ethan had plunged into work like a man possessed, expanding the family wine business into one of Spain's most prestigious wine companies. His Riojas and Ribera del Dueros were sold in Europe's most exclusive restaurants. His wineries received visits from celebrities and international magnates, and his personal fortune had multiplied tenfold in the last 2 decades. But all that success felt empty without Amelia to share it. She had been his companion since university, the only person who knew him when he had nothing but dreams and a small plot of vineyards inherited from his father. They had built the empire together. They had planned to have children together. They had dreamed of growing old together in the country house they had restored with their own hands. "Can I get you more wine, sir?" a soft voice asked in English with a subtle accent. Ethan looked up from his plate and met the eyes of a young waitress he hadn't seen before. She was slender, about 23, with brown hair pulled back in a neat bun and delicate features that vaguely reminded him of someone he couldn't identify. She wore the restaurant's black uniform professionally, but there was something in her movements that suggested she had known better times. Yes, please, Ethan replied, pushing his glass towards her. It's an excellent Ribera del Duero. The young woman smiled as she poured the red wine. My mother always said the best wines tell stories of the land where they were born. Something in that phrase made Ethan look at her more closely. It wasn't the kind of comment he would expect from a young waitress, but something that someone with real knowledge about wines would say. Your mother has good taste, Ethan commented. Did she work in the industry? The young woman's expression saddened slightly. She worked in wineries when she was young, before I was born. She always talked about the vineyards as if they were living beings. Ethan felt intrigued. There was something familiar in the way she talked about wines, a passion he recognized because he had seen it in Amelia when they visited wineries together in their early years. It was then that it happened. As the young woman finished serving the wine, her gaze fell on Ethan's right hand. Her eyes widened, and she almost dropped the bottle. "Excuse me, sir," she said with a trembling voice, staring at the ring. "That ring is identical to my mother's." Ethan's world stopped. The sentence was so impossible that for a moment he thought he had misheard. No one, absolutely no one, could have a ring identical to his. Only 3 existed in the world, and he had spent years unsuccessfully tracking the other 2. "Pardon?" he managed to articulate, feeling as if the air had left his lungs. The young woman realized she had said something inappropriate and blushed. "I'm so sorry, sir. I shouldn't have. It's just that it's exactly like the one my mother left me. The same emerald, the same diamonds around it, even the gold design." Ethan stared at her, looking for any sign that she was lying or confused. But her eyes showed absolute sincerity, and something else that deeply disturbed him. There was a familiarity in her features that he couldn't explain. "What's your name?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Layla. Layla Evans." The surname meant nothing to him, but there was something in her eyes, in the shape of her nose, in the curve of her smile, that was devastatingly familiar. It was like looking at a ghost from the past, but a ghost he couldn't fully identify. "Can you?" Trying to keep calm, even though his heart was pounding like a drum, Layla looked nervously around the restaurant. "I'm working, sir. My boss doesn't allow employees." "Is it important?" Ethan interrupted, pulling out his wallet and placing several 50-euro notes on the table. "More important than you can imagine." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Layla nodded slowly. "I have a photo on my phone. My mother. She died 2 years ago, and I always carry a photo of the ring because it's the only valuable thing she left me." With trembling hands, Layla took out a worn mobile phone and began to scroll through the photos. When she found the one she was looking for, she showed it to Ethan with a nervous expression. Ethan looked at the screen and felt as if the whole world had stopped. The ring in the photo was identical to his in every impossible detail. The same perfect emerald, the same diamonds arranged in the exact same pattern, the same Italian jeweler's mark engraved in the gold that only he knew. But that was impossible. Completely impossible. "What was your mother's full name?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. "Amelia Reed," Layla replied. "Why? Did you know my mother?" The name hit Ethan like a lightning bolt. Amelia. His Amelia. But the surname was different. His Amelia was Amelia Hayes before marrying him, and she had died as Amelia Vance. She had never used the surname Reed. "Can you tell me when you were born?" Ethan asked, desperately trying to process the information. "In March 2001, Layla replied, increasingly confused by the questions. Ethan did the calculations mentally and felt his legs weaken. March 2001. Exactly 9 months after the last night he had spent with Amelia before her death in June 2000. "Sir, are you all right?" Layla asked, noticing that the color had drained from Ethan's face. "You look like you're going to faint." Ethan clung to the edge of the table, trying to find some logical explanation for what was happening. But every detail pointed towards a conclusion so impossible that his mind refused to accept it. Amelia had not died. She had faked her death. And the young woman in front of him, the young woman with Amelia's eyes and her passion for wines, the young woman who had been born exactly 9 months after their last night together, was his daughter. His daughter, whom he never knew existed. "Layla," Ethan said, his voice breaking, "I need you to tell me everything you know about your mother. Everything. Her life, where she lived, how she died. And I need you to tell me where she is buried." "Why?" Layla asked, backing away slightly. "Who are you, really?" Ethan took the ring off his finger with trembling hands and showed it to Layla. "My name is Ethan Vance, and I believe that Amelia Reed was my wife. My wife, who supposedly died 23 years ago, 3 months before you were born." Layla froze, looking between the ring in Ethan's hand and her photo on the phone. The 2 rings were identical, down to the last detail. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My mother was never married. She told me my father had died before I was born. She told me she had never used any man's surname. Did she ever talk about someone named Ethan? About vineyards? About wineries?" Layla nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "She always talked about the vineyards, and sometimes, when she drank a little wine, she mentioned someone named E. She said E had been the love of her life, but that she had had to leave him to protect him. To protect him from what? I don't know. She never explained. She just said some decisions hurt forever, but that they were necessary." Ethan felt as if 23 years of pain and confusion finally began to make sense. Amelia had not died in an accident. She had deliberately disappeared. She had faked her death, and she had secretly raised their daughter, protecting her from something he didn't even know existed. "Where is she now?" Ethan asked. "Where is Amelia?" Tears began to stream down Layla's cheeks. "She died 2 years ago from cancer. She's buried in a small cemetery in Stratford-upon-Avon." "But sir, if what you're saying is true, if you really are my father, why did my mother lie to me my whole life?" Ethan got up from the table and approached Layla, seeing in her features the face of the woman he had loved and lost, finding in her eyes the answer to 23 years of unanswered questions. "I don't know, my child," he said softly. Using the term of endearment he had planned to use with the children he never thought he would have. "But we're going to find out together. We're going to discover why Amelia had to disappear, and we're going to make sure you never have to work to survive again." Layla looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear that broke Ethan's heart. "Do you really believe you're my father?" Ethan extended his hand, showing her the ring he had worn for 23 years as a symbol of lost love. "I believe rings don't lie, Layla, and I believe Amelia is giving us a second chance to be the family we always wanted to be." The restaurant continued at its normal pace around them, but for Ethan and Layla, the world had changed forever. A daughter had found her father. A father had discovered that the love of his life had had a reason to disappear, and both were about to embark on a journey that would take them back to the place where it all began, where Amelia had been waiting for them for 23 years. Chapter 2. The Journey to Truth. The journey to Stratford-upon-Avon began at 11 o'clock at night, when Layla was finally able to leave her shift at the restaurant. Ethan had waited patiently for 3 hours, drinking coffee after coffee, unable to fully process what he had discovered. Every time he watched Layla move between the tables, he saw Amelia's gestures that had been dormant in his memory for 23 years. The way she tilted her head when she listened attentively, the way she smiled with her eyes before her mouth, even the delicate way she held wine glasses. When Layla approached his table with a small backpack slung over her shoulder, Ethan could see that she had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, and there was a vulnerability in her expression that made him want to protect her from all the pain in the world. "I don't have much to pack," Layla said with a trembling voice. "I live in a shared apartment near Soho. I just needed to grab a few things and ask my flatmate to tell the landlord I won't be back for a few days." Ethan nodded, getting up to help her with the backpack, but she held it firmly against her chest. "Are you sure about this?" Layla asked. "I mean, are you really sure you want to make this trip with me? We could be wrong. It could just be a terrible coincidence." The question broke Ethan's heart because he could hear in her voice the experience of someone who had been disappointed before, someone who had learned not to trust adults' promises. "Layla," he said softly, "I have spent 23 years wondering what really happened to Amelia. I have spent 23 years feeling incomplete, as if a fundamental part of my soul was missing. But when I look at you, when I hear how you talk about wines, when I see your expressions, it's as if Amelia has returned to my life." He paused, searching for the right words. "And if I'm wrong, if it turns out this is just an impossible coincidence, then I will have lost a few days of my life. But if I'm right, if you really are my daughter, then I will have found the family I thought I had lost forever." Layla looked at him with a mixture of hope and terror. "What if my mother had good reasons to keep me away from you? What if there are things about her past that you don't know?" It was a smart question, and Ethan realized that Layla had inherited not only Amelia's beauty, but also her practical intelligence. "Then we'll find out together," he replied, "and we'll make decisions together about what to do with that information." They left the restaurant for the black Mercedes Ethan had rented at the airport. It was a luxurious but discreet vehicle, perfect for the 3-hour drive to Stratford-upon-Avon. As Ethan put Layla's backpack in the trunk, she stood on the sidewalk, looking at the car with a nervous expression. "Have you never been in a Mercedes?" Ethan asked gently. Layla shook her head. "My mother and I always had very old cars when we had cars. The last few years we took public transport for everything." She paused. "Are you really very rich?" The question was so direct that Ethan laughed despite the tension of the moment. "Yes," he admitted, "very rich. Does that make you uncomfortable?" "A little," Layla confessed. "My mother always distrusted people with a lot of money. She said power corrupts people, that it makes them forget what really matters." Ethan opened the passenger door for her. "Your mother was not wrong. I've seen how money can change people, how it can make them cruel and selfish. But I've also seen how it can be used to protect the people you love, to give them opportunities they never would have had." As they drove out of London, Ethan told Layla about his life for the past 23 years. He told her about how he had built the winery empire, about the international awards he had won, about the houses he owned in different countries. But he also told her about the loneliness, about the sleepless nights wondering what would have happened if Amelia had lived, about how he had filled the void in his heart with work and more work. "Did you never marry again?" Layla asked as they passed through the sleeping villages of England. "Never," Ethan replied. "There were women, of course, some relationships that lasted months, even one that lasted almost 2 years. But I could never fully commit, because a part of me still belonged to Amelia." "How did you two meet?" Ethan smiled, remembering. "At university in Oxford. She studied enology. I studied business administration. We met at a wine tasting her faculty organized. Amelia was the only student who could identify not only the region each wine came from, but also the exact vintage. My mother taught me about wine since I was very young," Layla said softly. "She always said that every wine had a story to tell, and that if you learned to listen, you could understand the soul of the vineyard." "Those are exactly the words Amelia used," Ethan whispered, feeling a shiver run down his spine. They continued driving in comfortable silence for an hour, each lost in their own thoughts. It was Layla who finally broke the silence with a question Ethan had been dreading. "Can you tell me exactly what happened the night my mother supposedly died?" Ethan took a deep breath, reliving the worst night of his life. "It was June 15th, 2000. Amelia had gone to Manchester for a meeting with potential distributors. She was supposed to return that night, but she called me around 8 p.m. Say the meeting had extended, and she would stay one more night. He paused, remembering every painful detail. The next morning, around 6 a.m., I received a call from the Manchester police. They told me there had been a terrible accident on the motorway. A truck had lost control and collided with several cars. Amelia? They said Amelia had died instantly. Did you see the body? Layla asked quietly. Ethan shook his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. The accident had been so severe that the bodies were unrecognizable. They told me they had identified her by her identity documents and by the rental car she was driving. And you never doubted that she had really died? Why would I doubt? Ethan replied. The police showed me the documents, the accident report. They even gave me her personal belongings that had been recovered from the car. Her bag, her watch, some work papers. Layla processed this information in silence. What kind of work did my mother do after she supposedly died? She worked in different small wineries, always under false names. Layla explained. She never stayed in the same place for more than 2 years. She always said she preferred to move around, get to know different wine regions. But now that I think about it, maybe she was running from something. Did she ever talk to you about enemies? About people who might have wanted to harm her? Layla thought for a moment. There was one name she mentioned sometimes when she had nightmares. A Mr. Thorne something. Mr. Lucas Thorne, I think. Whenever she said that name, she would get very nervous and quickly change the subject. The name hit Ethan like a lightning bolt. Lucas Thorne. A man who had tried to do business with him in the early years of his company, when it was still small and vulnerable. Thorne had a reputation for being involved in money laundering through legitimate businesses, and he had heavily pressured Ethan to accept an investment that would have given Thorne control over the winery's financial operations. Ethan had refused the offer, but Thorne had not accepted no for an answer. He had begun a campaign of subtle intimidation, surprise tax inspections, inexplicable problems with distributors, small acts of sabotage in the vineyards. Amelia had been very worried about the situation, especially after Thorne started making threatening comments about the family's safety. My God, Ethan murmured, pulling over to the side of the road. Amelia didn't fake her death on a whim. She did it to protect us both from Lucas Thorne. Who is that man? Layla asked, seeing the pallor on Ethan's face. A very dangerous criminal who wanted to use my company to launder dirty money. When I refused, he started threatening us. Amelia must have discovered something, or Thorne must have escalated his threats to the point where she felt the only way to protect me and our unborn child was to disappear completely. Layla placed her hand on Ethan's. Do you think that man is still dangerous? Ethan nodded grimly. Thorne never forgives and never forgets. If he found out Amelia was still alive all these years, and that I have a daughter. He didn't finish the sentence, but both understood the implication. What are we going to do? Layla asked. And Ethan noticed she had said, we. She was already starting to feel like part of a team, like part of a family. First, we're going to visit your mother's grave, Ethan said, restarting the car. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to understand exactly what happened. And then we're going to figure out how to protect you from Thorne while we decide what to do with this information. What if my mother left something? A letter? Some explanation? There's only one way to find out. They continued the journey to Stratford-upon-Avon, both lost in their own thoughts about what they might find there. For Ethan, it was the possibility of answers to 23 years of questions. For Layla, it was the possibility of finally understanding why she had grown up without a father, why her mother had been so mysterious about the past, why they had always lived as if they were running from something. But for both, it was also the beginning of something new, a family that had been separated by circumstances, but that destiny had brought back together. And as the lights of the towns passed by the Mercedes windows, both Ethan and Layla prepared to face a past that had been buried for more than 2 decades, unaware that the future they were building together would be more beautiful than either of them dared to hope. Chapter 3. Unearthing the Truth and a Mother's Legacy. The cemetery in Stratford-upon-Avon was a small, quiet place, surrounded by ancient cypress trees that cast long shadows under the full moon. Ethan stopped the Mercedes in front of the wrought iron gates and turned off the engine, letting the silence of the early morning envelop them. It was 2:15 a.m., and the world seemed to be asleep except for them and the secrets they were about to unearth. Layla got out of the car slowly, hugging herself against the November chill. She had been quiet for the last 30 minutes of the journey, lost in thoughts about everything she had discovered in a single night. Her entire life had been a carefully constructed lie, and now she was about to face the grave of the mother she had believed she knew. "Are you sure you can do this?" Ethan asked softly, noticing how Layla's hands trembled. "We can wait until morning, find a hotel, and come when there's daylight." Layla shook her head, straightening her shoulders with a determination that painfully reminded him of Amelia. "No, I've waited my whole life to understand who my mother really was. I can't wait another hour." Ethan nodded, fully understanding that feeling. He himself had lived 23 years with unanswered questions, and now that he was so close to the truth, every minute felt like an eternity. They easily jumped the low cemetery fence. There were no security guards, no cameras, just silent rows of gravestones, telling stories of lives that had come to their end. Layla took out her mobile phone and turned on the flashlight, guiding Ethan along the narrow paths between the tombs. "It's around here," she murmured, walking with the certainty of someone who had made this journey many times. "Sector C, row 12. I always come on her birthday and the anniversary of her death." They walked in silence for several minutes, passing gravestones with familiar English names and dates spanning over a century. Finally, Layla stopped in front of a modest grave with a white marble headstone that glowed softly under the moonlight. Ethan read the inscription and felt his legs weaken. "Amelia Reed Hayes, 1972-2022. Beloved mother, who found the peace you sought in life." "Hayes," Ethan murmured. That was her mother's maiden name. She used both her mother's maiden names to hide. Layla nodded, kneeling beside the grave and running her fingers over the engraved letters. "I always found that phrase about finding peace strange. My mother never seemed to be at peace. She was always looking over her shoulder. She was always worried about something she couldn't name." Ethan knelt beside Layla, finally facing the grave of the woman he had loved more than his own life. "Amelia," he whispered, "why didn't you tell me you were in danger? We would have found another way. We would have fought together." It was then that Layla noticed something strange in the headstone's design. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a small inscription at the bottom that Ethan hadn't seen. "There are numbers here, 15/6/2000. That's the date she supposedly died in Manchester. Why would she put that date on her real headstone?" Ethan wondered. Layla studied the headstone more carefully with her phone's light. "There's something else. See this little mark here? It looks like there's something hidden behind the headstone." Indeed, there was a small crack in the marble that didn't look natural. Ethan ran his fingers over it and realized there was a small hidden compartment behind the stone. "We need something to open this," Ethan said, searching his pockets. Layla took out a small Swiss Army knife from her backpack. "My mother taught me to always carry useful tools," she explained with a sad smile. Working together, they managed to pry open the small marble section until it slid aside, revealing a waterproof compartment the size of a book. Inside was a thick envelope sealed in plastic and what appeared to be a small object wrapped in velvet. Ethan took the envelope with trembling hands, while Layla carefully unwrapped the object. It was another ring, identical to the one Ethan wore, but this one had a different inscription inside. For my eternal love, Evie. June 2000. It's the engagement ring you gave her, Layla whispered. She kept it all these years. Ethan opened the envelope and found several pages written in Amelia's familiar handwriting, dated just 3 weeks before her death in 2022. With trembling hands, he began to read aloud under the moonlight. My dearest Ethan, if you are reading this, it means you have finally found our daughter. It means my plan worked, even though it cost 23 years of separation that I can never get back. I know you have 1,000 questions, and I will do my best to answer them all. First, most importantly, Layla is yours. Completely yours. She was born on March 15th, 2001, exactly 9 months after our last night together before I had to fake my death. That night in June 2000, Lucas Thorne came to see me while you were at the vineyard. He told me he knew I was pregnant before I even knew myself. He had been watching me, spying on me, waiting for the perfect moment to use our baby as leverage against you. Ethan paused, feeling nauseous. That monster knew you were pregnant before us. Layla squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue reading. Thorne told me I had 2 options: convince you to accept his business partnership, or watch our baby suffer a very convenient accident after birth. He said he had experience making babies disappear without a trace, and that he would enjoy seeing your pain if you didn't cooperate. I couldn't risk our child's life, Ethan. I couldn't risk your life either, because I knew that if something happened to the baby, you would go after Thorne no matter the consequences. So I made the most difficult decision of my life. I contacted a distant cousin who worked in the Manchester morgue, someone who had legal troubles and needed money. I arranged my own death, using the body of a woman who had died in an accident and had no family to claim the body. Tears were streaming freely down Ethan's face now. My God, Amelia, all you went through alone. I hoped it would be temporary, the letter continued. I thought I could hide just until the baby was born, and then we would find a way to expose Thorne and return home. But when Layla was born, I realized that Thorne had contacts everywhere. He had police on his payroll, judges who owed him favors, people willing to do anything for money. Every time I considered returning, something would happen that reminded me he was still watching. A mutual acquaintance who appeared in the town where we lived. Strange questions from strangers about a woman with a baby. Thorne never stopped looking for me. He never stopped waiting for me to make a mistake. So I made the decision to remain dead to you both. It was the only gift I could give you, a life free from the threat of Lucas Thorne. Ethan had to stop, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the sacrifice Amelia had made. She gave up everything to keep us safe, he murmured. Layla had tears streaming down her face, too. Keep reading, please. I need to know everything. I raised Layla by telling her stories about you without mentioning your name. I taught her everything I knew about wines, because it was our love story. I taught her to be strong, independent, not to depend on anyone but herself, because I knew that one day she would have to face the world alone. But I also raised her with the hope that one day, when Thorne was too old or too weak to be a threat, she could meet her father. That's why I gave her the ring. That's why I took her to work in restaurants where people from your social circle might find her. Ethan, when I was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago, I knew my time was running out. I discreetly contacted some of your old friends and found out that Thorne had died in prison in Twewa, a heart attack, according to reports. We were finally free. But it was too late for me. The cancer had spread too much, and the doctors gave me only a few months. Instead of revealing the truth to you, and then dying, I decided to do this in a way that you would have time to process everything before meeting your daughter. I put this plan in motion, knowing that Layla would eventually find work in places where people like you dine. Knowing that someone would notice the ring and ask questions. Knowing that fate would help us reunite our family when it was safe to do so. Ethan stopped again, overwhelmed by the intelligence and love behind Amelia's plan. If you are reading this, Ethan, it means my plan worked. It means you have found our beautiful, intelligent, strong daughter. It means you can finally be the family we always wanted to be. Take care of Layla, my love. Teach her about the vineyards we loved so much. Teach her that true love sometimes requires terrible sacrifices, but that it is always worth it. Teach her that she is the daughter of two people who loved each other so much that they were willing to give up everything to protect her. And please, forgive me for stealing 23 years of being a father. Forgive me for stealing the opportunity to know your daughter when she was little. There was no other way. I love you, Ethan Vance. I loved you until my last breath, and I will love you in any life that comes after this one. And now you can love each other as father and daughter, free from the shadows that haunted us for so long. P.S. At the HSBC Bank in Stratford-upon-Avon, account number 45912, there is money I saved during all these years working. It is for Layla, for her education, to give her the opportunities I couldn't give her when she was little. The password is your date of birth. When Ethan finished reading, both he and Layla were crying uncontrollably. They hugged each other beside Amelia's grave, father and daughter finally united after 23 years of forced separation. She brought us back together, Layla whispered. Even after she died, she found a way to give us what we had always lost. Ethan nodded, holding his daughter against his chest for the first time. Your mother was the smartest and bravest woman I have ever known, and you are exactly like her. They stayed by the grave until the sun began to rise, sharing stories about the woman they had loved from different perspectives, but with the same depth. And when they finally stood up to leave, both knew that although they had lost 23 years, they had the rest of their lives to build the family Amelia had dreamed for them. The ring on Ethan's finger no longer felt like a symbol of loss. It felt like a promise fulfilled, like a circle finally closed, like the beginning of everything he had been waiting for without knowing it. Chapter 4. A new vintage of life. 6 months after the encounter in the cemetery, Layla's life had changed in ways she never would have imagined possible. She no longer worked as a waitress in London, struggling to pay rent for a shared apartment and living day to day without knowing what the future held. Now she lived in the main house of Vance Vineyards, in a bright room overlooking the vineyards that stretched to the horizon, waking up every morning to the aroma of grapes ripening under the Rioja sun. Ethan had insisted that she move in immediately after returning from Stratford-upon-Avon. "This is your home," he had told her, leading her through the hallways of the family mansion that had been lovingly restored over decades. "It was always your home. You just didn't know it." The adjustment hadn't been easy at first. Layla had grown up in small apartments, accustomed to the modest life she had shared with Amelia. Suddenly finding herself on a 300-hectare property with employees who treated her like the heiress she technically was had been overwhelming. But Ethan had been patient, gentle, allowing her to find her own rhythm. He hadn't pressured her to call him Dad, though the day she finally did, 3 months after moving in, he had had to leave the dining room so she wouldn't see him cry with joy. "Good morning, Dad," Layla had said that morning, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And from that moment on, both had known that they truly were a family. Now, on this sunny May morning, Layla walked among the vines with a notebook in her hands, taking notes on the progress of the harvest. Ethan had taught her everything he knew about viticulture, and she had shown to have the same natural instinct for wines that she had inherited from both parents. "The grapes in the south parcel will be ready for harvest next week," she told Ethan, when she found him in the main winery, tasting samples of the previous year's wine. Ethan looked up from the glasses in front of him and smiled. In recent months, He had seen Layla blossom in ways that filled him with paternal pride. She was no longer the shy, cautious young woman he had met in London. She had become a confident woman, with strong opinions about the business and innovative ideas for expanding the brand. "Are you sure?" he asked, knowing that her opinion was as valuable as that of any enologist with years of experience. "Completely sure. The sugar level is perfect, and if we wait much longer, we'll lose the acidity that makes our wines unique." Ethan nodded, completely trusting his daughter's judgment. "Then we'll organize the harvest for Monday. Do you want to be in charge of coordinating with the seasonal workers?" Ethan felt Amelia's loss more intensely. She would have been so proud to see her daughter become such an integral part of the family business. She would have loved to see how Layla had inherited not only her passion for wines, but also her practical intelligence and her ability to connect with people. "Dad," Layla said, interrupting his thoughts, "there's something I want to propose." "What is it?" "I've been thinking about Mom, about everything she sacrificed to keep us safe, and I think we should do something to honor her memory." Ethan looked at her with curiosity. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to create a special line of wines made exclusively by women, for women who have had to be strong in difficult circumstances. We could call it the Amelia Collection, and part of the profits could go to organizations that help single mothers." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. It was exactly the kind of project Amelia would have loved, exactly how she would have wanted to be remembered. "It's a perfect idea," he said, hugging his daughter. "Let's do it." Over the next few weeks, father and daughter worked together developing the Amelia Collection. They hired female enologists from all over Spain, created elegant labels with the design of the emerald ring that had united the family, and developed a brand story that honored the sacrifice and strength of mothers everywhere. But the project also gave them the opportunity to talk more deeply about Amelia, about the memories Ethan had kept for 23 years, and the stories Layla had grown up hearing without fully understanding their meaning. "Do you know what I miss most about your mother?" Ethan asked her one afternoon, as they reviewed the first samples of the Amelia Collection. "What?" Her laugh. She had this laugh that filled the whole room, that made everyone around her happy just by being near her. Layla smiled. "I remember that laugh, especially when she told me stories about the mysterious vineyards where a man lived who understood the soul of the grapes. Did she tell you stories about me?" "All the time. She never mentioned your name, but now I realize that all her favorite stories were about you, the prince of the vineyards, who could create liquid magic in bottles, the man who talked to the vines as if they were old friends." Ethan was silent, overwhelmed by the idea that Amelia had kept his memory alive through fairy tales told to their daughter. "Do you know what I miss most about her?" Layla asked. "What?" "The way she hugged me when I had nightmares. I used to have terrible dreams about evil men coming to take her away, and she always knew exactly what to say to make me feel safe again." Ethan realized that even Layla's dreams had been affected by Thorne's threats, by the constant fear Amelia had lived with for years. "You'll never have to worry about evil men again," he told her firmly. "You're safe here, with me. This is your family. This is your home." It was during one of these conversations that Layla mentioned something that changed everything for Ethan. "Dad, there's something I found among Mom's things that I haven't shown you." "What is it?" Layla left the room and returned with a small wooden box that Ethan recognized immediately. It was the box where Amelia kept her most precious possessions when they were young. "It was at the bottom of her closet," Layla explained. "I had never opened it because it had a padlock. But after we found the letter in the cemetery, I thought maybe—" Ethan took the box with trembling hands. After several attempts, he managed to open the padlock using Layla's birth date as the combination. Inside were photos of their life together that he thought had been lost forever. Amelia pregnant, smiling at the camera with a protective hand on her belly. Photos of their wedding, of their first vineyards, of happy moments that Ethan had believed only existed in his memory. But what impacted him most was finding a video on an old USB drive. When they played it on Layla's computer, Amelia appeared on screen, clearly recorded shortly before her death. "Hello, my love," Amelia said in the video, her voice weak but full of love. "If you're watching this, it means my plan worked, and you have found our beautiful daughter." Ethan sat down heavily, with Layla by his side, both transfixed by the image of the woman who had defined their lives in such different but equally profound ways. "Ethan, I want you to know that every day of these 23 years, I have thought of you. I have thought of the life we were building together, the children we planned to have, the wines we were going to create. Not a single day goes by that I don't wonder how everything would have been different if we could have faced Thorne's threat together." Amelia paused, clearly fighting back tears. "But I also want you to know that I don't regret my decision. Look at you now, Ethan. Look at what you have built. Look at the empire you have created, the life you have lived free of threats and danger. And look at our daughter. Look at her, and tell me it wasn't worth every day of loneliness, every night of missing you until it hurt to breathe." Layla was crying silently, seeing for the first time her mother speak directly to her father, seeing the love that had defined her own existence. "Layla, my precious child," Amelia continued, looking directly at the camera. "If you are watching this with your father, it means you finally know the truth about who you are. You are the daughter of the purest love I have known. You are the daughter of a man who would have given his life to protect you, and of a woman who gave 23 years of her life to ensure you were safe." Amelia smiled through her tears. "Now you are free to love each other as father and daughter. You are free to build the family we always wanted to be. You are free to create wines that tell the story of our love, to create a legacy that honors everything we have been through to get to this moment." The video ended with Amelia blowing a kiss to the camera, whispering, "I love you both more than words can express." When the screen went black, Ethan and Layla hugged, crying, feeling as if Amelia had been in the room with them, blessing the family they had finally managed to form. "She was right," Layla whispered. "It was worth it. All the pain, all the separation. Everything was worth it to get to this moment." Ethan nodded, holding his daughter, and feeling that for the first time in 23 years, his life was complete. He had his daughter, he had his business, he had Amelia's memories restored to their rightful place in his heart. And he had the certainty that the future they would build together would be worthy of all that Amelia had sacrificed to make it possible. Chapter 4: A New Beginning in the Vineyards. 2 years after the launch of the Amelia collection, Vance Vineyards had experienced the most significant growth in its history. The wine line dedicated to honoring Amelia's memory had not only been a resounding commercial success, but had become a symbol of hope for women across Europe and beyond. The bottles with the elegant golden label bearing the emerald ring design sold in Europe's most exclusive restaurants, and the story behind the brand had touched hearts worldwide. Layla, now 25, had become the company's creative director, a position she had earned not by being the owner's daughter, but by her innovative vision and intuitive understanding of the market. She had proposed expanding the Amelia collection to include not just wines, but also experiences. Weekend retreats for single mothers at the vineyards, mentorship programs for female entrepreneurs, and a foundation that granted educational scholarships to daughters of working mothers. "The quarterly numbers are extraordinary," Layla told Ethan as they reviewed the financial reports in the main office, a bright room with windows overlooking the vineyards that stretched towards the distant mountains. "We've exceeded all our projections for the second consecutive year." Ethan smiled, observing his daughter as she explained the graphs and statistics, with the passion she had inherited from both him and Amelia. In the past 2 years, he had seen Layla transform from an insecure young woman working as a waitress to survive into a respected executive who was invited to speak at international conferences on innovation in the wine industry. "Your mother would be so proud," Ethan murmured, a phrase he had repeated hundreds of times, but which never lost its profound meaning. "I know," Layla replied with a smile that lit up the entire room. "Sometimes I feel as if she's here with us, especially when we're in the vineyards at sunset. It's like I can hear her laughter in the wind." It was true. Both had developed the feeling that Amelia was still part of their lives, not as a haunting ghost, but as a loving presence that blessed every important decision they made together. The office door opened, and Robert Sinclair, the marketing director they had hired to handle the brand's international expansion, entered. He was a brilliant young man with innovative ideas on how to position luxury products in emerging markets. "Ethan, Layla, I have extraordinary news," Robert said with a smile he couldn't contain. "I just hung up the phone with representatives from Harrods in London. They want to make the Amelia collection the exclusive wine line for their luxury gift department." Layla jumped up, excited. "Harrods? Really?" "Not only that," Robert continued. "They've also expressed interest in creating a special event around the brand's story. They want Layla to go to London to tell Amelia's story, the story of how true love can transcend even death." Ethan felt a mix of pride and emotion that overwhelmed him. Just 3 years ago, Layla had been serving tables in London, not even knowing who her father was. Now she was one of the most respected women in the Spanish wine industry, and her personal story had inspired millions of people. "There's more," Robert added. "Wine Spectator magazine wants to do a cover story on the Vance family. They want to call it The Miracle of the Rings, how destiny reunited a lost family." Layla looked at her father with sparkling eyes. "What do you think, Dad? Are we ready for the whole world to know our story?" Ethan considered the question seriously. For years, he had been a private man, preferring to keep his personal life separate from his business. But his family's story was more than personal now. It had become a source of inspiration for other families who had been separated by circumstances, other people who had lost hope of finding their loved ones. "I think your mother would have wanted us to share our story if it could help other people," he finally said. "I think she would have wanted the world to know that true love always finds a way to reunite families, no matter how much time passes or what obstacles they face." The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Layla traveled to London for the event at Harrods, where she told Amelia's story to an audience of 300 people who remained in complete silence throughout her presentation. When she finished, she received a 5-minute standing ovation, and many people approached her afterwards to share their own stories of separated and reunited families. The Wine Spectator article was published in December, with a cover photo of Ethan and Layla holding glasses of Amelia wine in the vineyards, with the sun setting behind them. The article generated thousands of letters from readers around the world, people who had been touched by the story and who wanted to share their own experiences of loss, hope, and family reunion. But it was during the New Year's Eve party at the vineyards when something happened that neither of them had expected. Layla had organized an intimate celebration for employees, close friends, and some of the women who had participated in the Amelia Foundation's programs. It was a perfect night, with the stars shining over the vineyards and music filling the warm air of the winery's main courtyard. Ethan was talking to one of his most experienced enologists when he noticed Layla talking animatedly with a young man he didn't recognize. He was tall, dark-haired, with a genuine smile and a way of listening to Layla that suggested real interest in what she was saying. "Who's that young man?" Ethan asked Robert, who was standing nearby. "Ah, that's David Hayes, the new enologist we hired for the expansion of the Amelia collection. He's brilliant, graduated summa cum laude from the University of Bordeaux, and has revolutionary ideas about organic fermentation. Ethan watched as David and Layla laughed together, how he looked at her with admiration and respect, and felt something he hadn't experienced before, the feeling that his daughter was growing up, that she was ready to start her own love story. Over the next few months, David became a constant presence at the vineyards and, eventually, in Layla's life. He was intelligent, ambitious, but also gentle and respectful. He shared Layla's passion for wines and her dedication to using the business as a force for good in the world. "What do you think of David?" Layla asked Ethan one afternoon as they walked among the vines. Ethan smiled. "I think your mother would have approved. I think she would have seen in him the same thing I see. A man who loves you for who you are, not for what you have." "How can you be so sure?" "By the way he looks at you. It's the same way I looked at your mother, the same way she looked at me. It's the look of true love, Layla. And after everything you've been through to get here, you deserve nothing less than that." And it was on the 3rd anniversary of the launch of the Amelia collection that David proposed to Layla. He did it in the same place where Ethan and Amelia had exchanged vows 30 years before, in a small chapel in the hills surrounding the vineyards. David had designed a special ring for the occasion, a perfect emerald surrounded by diamonds, inspired by the family rings, but unique in its own design. "It's beautiful," Layla whispered with tears in her eyes as David knelt before her at sunset. "Layla Vance," David said solemnly, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of building a family with me, of creating a love story that is worthy of the tradition of true love you have inherited?" "Yes," Layla replied without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Ethan watched from a respectful distance, tears streaming down his face. In that moment, he could feel Amelia's presence more strongly than ever, as if she were standing beside him, watching their daughter begin the next chapter of her life. "We did it, my love," he whispered to the starry sky. "Our daughter found true love, just as you wished. She is safe, she is happy, and she is surrounded by love." A gentle breeze blew through the vineyards, carrying with it the scent of ripening grapes and the promise of future harvests. And in that breeze, Ethan could have sworn he heard Amelia's laughter, blessing the family that had finally managed to be complete. The wedding was planned for the following spring, in the vineyards where it all began. It would be a celebration not only of the love between Layla and David, but also of Amelia's legacy, of the miracle of the reunited family, and of the promise that true love always finds a way to flourish, no matter how many seasons of darkness it has to endure. Chapter 6. A Wedding and a Legacy in Bloom. The morning of May 15th dawned perfectly at Vance Vineyards, as if the universe itself had conspired to create the ideal day for Layla's wedding. The sun shone softly over the vineyards that stretched to the horizon. A light breeze rustled the leaves of the vines with a musical whisper, and the scent of wild flowers growing between the rows of grapes filled the air with a fragrance that seemed to bless the entire property. Ethan woke before dawn, as he had done for the past 30 years. But this morning was different. Today, his daughter would marry in the same place where he had exchanged vows with Amelia 3 decades ago. Today, he would close a circle that had begun with love, had been interrupted by tragedy, and now was completed with hope and renewal. He dressed carefully in the tuxedo he had custom-made for the occasion, a classic yet elegant design that Layla had helped him choose. As he adjusted his tie in front of his bedroom mirror, Ethan touched the ring on his right ring finger, the same ring he had worn for 24 years as a symbol of lost love, and which he now wore as a symbol of eternal love and a reunited family. "Good morning, my love," he whispered towards Amelia's photo that he kept on his bedside table. "Today our daughter is getting married. I wish you could be here to see her." As if in response, a gentle breeze entered through the open window, moving the curtains in a way that felt to Ethan like a gentle embrace. Meanwhile, in the guest house, they had converted into a bridal suite for the occasion. Layla was getting ready, surrounded by the most important women in her life. There was Maria Lewis, the director of the Amelia Foundation, who had become a mentor and close friend. Carmen, her best friend from university, who had flown from London to be present. And Rose Miller, one of the first beneficiaries of the Foundation's programs, who now worked as a special events coordinator at the Vineyards. "You look radiant," Maria Lewis told her as she helped Layla with the final details of her dress. It was an extraordinary creation, designed by a Spanish fashion house that had wanted to contribute to the celebration. The dress was made of ivory silk, with hand-embroidered details representing vines and grapes, a subtle tribute to the family legacy that had made this moment possible. Layla looked at herself in the full-length mirror and for a moment caught her breath. The woman looking back at her from the reflection was completely different from the insecure young woman who had worked as a waitress in London just 4 years ago. Her eyes sparkled with confidence and happiness. Her posture exuded the elegance she had developed as a director of an international company. But more importantly, her smile showed the deep peace of someone who had found their place in the world. "Do you think my mother would be proud?" Layla asked softly, adjusting the veil that had belonged to Amelia, the only personal item she had managed to keep during all the years of hiding. "Layla," Carmen said, taking her friend's hands, "your mother sacrificed 23 years of her life so you could have this exact moment. Of course she would be proud. She would be more than proud. She would be ecstatic." Rose nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've seen many brides during my years working in events, but I've never seen one radiate so much genuine happiness. It's clear that this marriage isn't just a ceremony. It's the culmination of a love story that began before you were born." As the women finished preparing Layla, the guests began to arrive at the Vineyards. They had decided to keep the ceremony relatively intimate, just 200 people. But those 200 represented the most important connections the Vance family had built over the years. International distributors, who had worked with Ethan for decades, were present. Famous enologists, who deeply respected the family's work. Wine journalists, who had followed the story of the Amelia collection since its inception. And dozens of women whose lives had been touched by the programs of the Amelia Foundation. But perhaps the most significant guests were the people who represented the past that had made this present possible. Robert Sinclair, the marketing director who had helped build the international brand, was there with his family. Dr. Emily Clark, the enologist who had collaborated on the first wines of the Amelia collection, had traveled from France to be present, and in the front row, in seats of honor, were the symbolic graves of all the women who had inspired the creation of the foundation, represented by photos and flowers that their families had sent. The ceremony would take place on a platform specially built for the occasion, slightly elevated above the vineyards, so that all guests could see clearly. The altar was decorated with floral arrangements that included the same wildflowers that grew naturally among the vines, creating a sense that the celebration was an organic extension of the surrounding landscape. David waited at the altar, dressed in a traditional tuxedo, but with an embroidered waistcoat that matched the details of Layla's dress. He looked nervous but radiant, speaking in a low voice with the officiant as he mentally reviewed the vows he had written dozens of times over the past few weeks. At exactly 5 in the afternoon, the music began. It wasn't the traditional wedding march, but a piece specially composed for the occasion by a local musician, a melody that incorporated natural sounds of the vineyards, the rustle of the wind through the leaves, the song of the birds nesting in the vines, even the subtle sound of wine fermenting in nearby barrels. The guests stood when Ethan appeared at the entrance of the aisle, looking prouder than anyone had ever seen him. He walked slowly towards the altar, nodding to the friends and colleagues who had come from distant places to celebrate this moment with his family. When he reached the altar, Ethan turned towards the entrance and waited along with everyone else for his daughter's appearance. The music changed, becoming richer and more emotional, and Layla appeared at the entrance of the aisle. A murmur of admiration ran through the audience when they saw her, not only for her beauty, but for the grace and confidence with which she moved. She walked slowly, savoring each step, looking at the smiling faces of the people who had been part of her journey to this moment. But when her eyes met David's, waiting for her at the altar, everything else disappeared. There were only the two of them, connected by a love that had developed naturally, without drama or trauma. A pure love that had grown in the fertile ground of security and happiness that Amelia had sacrificed so much to create. Ethan took his daughter's arm when she reached him, and together they walked the last few meters to the altar. It was a moment he had dreamed of for years without knowing if it would ever happen, and now that he was living it, it felt more perfect than he had imagined. "Who gives this woman in marriage?" the officiant asked. "Her mother and I," Ethan replied, his voice clear but laden with emotion. "We give her with love, with pride, and with the blessing of all the generations of our family who have believed in the power of true love." David took Layla's hand, and Ethan sat in the front row, feeling as if Amelia were sitting beside him, sharing this moment they had dreamed of together, but only he could witness. The ceremony was beautiful but simple, focusing on the personal vows that David and Layla had written for each other. David spoke of how Layla had changed his understanding of what love meant, how she had shown that true love existed not only in fairy tales, but in real life, between real people who chose to love each other every day. Layla spoke of how David had come into her life at the perfect moment, when she had finally found peace with her past and was ready to build a future. She spoke of how he respected her mother's memory without feeling threatened by it, how he had understood that the love she had for Amelia did not diminish the love she had available for him. When it was time to exchange rings, David placed on Layla's finger a ring he had specially designed for her, inspired by the family rings, but unique in its own beauty. Layla placed on David's finger a ring that featured a small emerald, a nod to the family tradition that he would now become a part of. "By the power vested in me," the officiant said, "and before all these witnesses who love you, I now pronounce you husband and wife. David, you may kiss your wife." The kiss was tender but passionate, and when they separated, both had tears of happiness in their eyes. The guests erupted in applause and cheers, but above all the noise, Ethan could have sworn he heard something else. Amelia's laughter carried by the wind that blew softly over the vineyards. The reception was held in the winery's main courtyard, under the stars that began to appear as the sun set behind the mountains. There was music, dancing, and toasts that lasted late into the night, but the most emotional moment came when Ethan stood up to give his speech as the father of the bride. "4 years ago," he began, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the courtyard, "my daughter approached me in a restaurant in London and changed my life forever with a simple observation about a ring. That night, I discovered that I hadn't lost the woman I loved, but that she had found a way to return to me through the beautiful daughter we had created together." He paused, looking directly at Layla and David. "Amelia, if you can hear me, I want you to know that you succeeded. Our daughter has become everything we dreamed she would be. Strong, intelligent, compassionate, and now, completely loved by a man who deserves her. The sacrifice you made was not in vain. The love you protected for 23 years has flourished in ways you could never have imagined. He raised his glass to the starry sky. To Amelia, who taught us that true love transcends even death. To Layla, who taught us that family always finds a way to reunite. And to David, who taught us that the best love stories are those that honor the past while building the future. All the guests stood and toasted, and at that moment, a shooting star crossed the sky directly over the courtyard. It was impossible for it to be a coincidence, and everyone present knew that Amelia had found a way to bless the celebration from wherever she was now. The night continued with music and dancing until the early hours of the morning. Layla and David opened the dance with a song they had chosen together, a Spanish ballad about love that overcomes all difficulties. Afterwards, Ethan danced with his daughter, a moment they had both waited for years without knowing if it would ever happen. "Thank you, Dad," Layla whispered as they danced slowly under the stars, "for finding me, for loving me, for giving me the family I always wanted to have." "Thank you," Ethan replied, "for coming back into my life and making it complete again." When the last song ended and the last guests left, the Vance family remained alone in the courtyard, contemplating the beauty of what they had built together. David and Layla sat on a wooden bench under the property's oldest vine, talking in low voices about the dreams they had for their future together. Ethan walked away discreetly to give them privacy, but before entering the house, he turned to look once more at the scene. His daughter and his new son-in-law beginning their life together in the place where it all began, surrounded by the vineyards that represented generations of love, work, and dedication. "We did it, Amelia," he whispered to the stars. "Our family is complete." And in the night wind that whispered through the vines, Ethan was sure he could hear Amelia's answer. "I know, my love. I know." Chapter 7. The Vineyard's New Harvest of Life. 3 years after the wedding that marked the complete rebirth of the Vance family, the Vineyards had become something much greater than Ethan had ever dreamed. They were not only internationally recognized for the exceptional quality of their wines, but they had transformed into a symbol of hope and family reunion that inspired people all over the world. It was a golden September morning when Layla walked slowly among the vines, a protective hand on her 6-month pregnant belly. At 28, she had become the CEO of Vance Vineyards, while David led the technological innovation that had brought the company to the forefront of sustainable viticulture. But more important than any professional achievement, they were about to bring the 4th generation of the family into the world, a baby who would carry in their veins the heritage of love, sacrifice, and determination that had defined their ancestors. "How are you feeling today, little one?" Layla murmured, gently stroking her belly as she watched the workers preparing for the autumn harvest. "Your great-grandmother, Amelia, would have been so excited to meet you." The baby responded with a strong kick, as if it had understood the mention of its great-grandmother, and Layla smiled. Throughout her pregnancy, she had felt a special connection with Amelia, as if her mother's loving presence was guiding every moment of this new life growing inside her. From the porch of this main house, Ethan watched his daughter with a mixture of paternal pride and wonder that still surprised him after all these years. At 57, he had become a completely different man from the solitary businessman he had been for decades. His now completely gray hair gave him a distinguished air, but his eyes sparkled with a vitality that had been absent during the 23 years he had spent believing he had lost his family forever. "Grandpa!" a small but firm voice said behind him. Ethan turned and smiled at the sight of Sophia, Layla, and David's 3-year-old daughter running towards him with her golden curls shining under the morning sun. The little girl had inherited Amelia's intelligent eyes and Layla's quiet determination, but she had a personality all her own that filled the house with laughter and energy every day. "Sophia, my princess!" Ethan exclaimed, lifting his granddaughter into his arms. "What adventures do you have planned for today?" "I want to help Mom with the grapes," Sophia declared with the seriousness of someone who had made an important decision. Dad says the grapes tell us secrets if we listen. Ethan laughed, remembering similar conversations he had had with Layla when she was little. And before that, the conversations he had had with Amelia about the soul of the vineyards. It was extraordinary how certain family traditions were passed down from generation to generation, even when families had been separated by impossible circumstances. Your dad is right, he told Sophia as they walked together towards where Layla was inspecting the vines. But to hear the grapes' secrets, you have to be very, very patient. I am patient, Sophia insisted, though she immediately started running towards her mother, proving the exact opposite. Layla laughed when she saw her daughter approaching, followed by Ethan, who walked at a calmer pace. Good morning, my love, she told Sophia, kneeling carefully to receive the girl's enthusiastic hug. Ready to help me check the grapes? Yes, Grandpa says the grapes have secrets. Your grandpa is very wise, Layla replied, looking at her father with affection. Do you know the most important secret the grapes tell us? Sophia shook her head, her eyes wide with curiosity. They tell us that the best things in life require time, patience, and a lot of love. Like this family, like the wine we make here, like the baby that will be born soon. Sophia put her small hand on her mother's belly. Is the baby going to make wines too? Someday, if they want to, Layla replied. But most importantly, they're going to be part of our family. They're going to grow up knowing all the love stories that brought us here. It was at that moment that David appeared from the main winery, with a barely contained expression of excitement on his face. Layla, Ethan, you have to see this, he said, holding an elegant envelope in his hands. What is it? Layla asked, intrigued by her husband's expression. A letter from the King of Spain, David replied, still processing the reality of what he held in his hands. Vance Vineyards has been selected to receive the Royal Award for Business Excellence, not only for its wines, but for the social impact of the Amelia Foundation. Ethan was speechless. The Royal Award was one of the most prestigious honors a Spanish company could receive, granted only to organizations that had demonstrated excellence not only in their products, but in their contribution to society's well-being. There's more, David continued. They want Layla to represent the company at the award ceremony, and they have specifically requested that she tell the story of how the Amelia Foundation was born from a mother's love, who sacrificed everything to protect her family. Layla felt tears of emotion streaming down her cheeks. Mom would be so proud, she whispered. Her story is going to be told in the royal palace. It's going to inspire people we don't even know exist. Sophia, who had been listening to the conversation without fully understanding its meaning, raised her hand. Can I go to the palace too? Everyone laughed, and David picked her up. Of course you can come, princess. You're going to meet a real king. Is he more important than Grandpa? Sophia asked with full seriousness. Ethan laughed until his stomach hurt. No, my love. No one is more important than family. The following months were a whirlwind of preparations for the royal ceremony, but also of reflection on the incredible journey that had led the Vance family from that fateful night in the London restaurant to this moment of national recognition. The Amelia Foundation had grown into an international organization operating in 12 countries, providing education, mentorship, and financial support to over 5,000 women and their families. Programs ranged from university scholarships to business skills training, from psychological support for women who had faced domestic violence to housing programs for single mothers. But beyond the numbers and statistics, the foundation had achieved something even more important. It had shown that a personal story of love and sacrifice could transform into a force for good that touched thousands of lives. Each woman who had been helped by the foundation carried with her a piece of Amelia's story, turning her sacrifice into an exponentially multiplied inspiration. The day of the royal ceremony finally arrived in December. Layla, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, looked radiant in a navy blue dress specially designed for the occasion. She wore Amelia's ring on a chain around her neck, and Ethan wore his family ring, the two symbols of love that had reunited their family, finally displayed together in the royal palace. Sophia, dressed as a tiny princess in a pink dress with sparkling shoes, held her grandfather's hand firmly as they walked through the palace's ornate corridors. David, elegant in his tuxedo, kept a protective arm around Layla, making sure she was comfortable despite her advanced pregnancy. When it was time to receive the award, Layla stepped onto the podium with the grace she had developed during years of representing the company at international events. But when she began to speak, it wasn't the professional executive who took the floor, but the daughter who had found her lost father, the woman who had grown up with stories of true love, the future mother who was determined to pass on the legacy of family strength to the next generation. "Your Majesty, distinguished guests," Layla began, her voice clear and emotional. "This award is not mine. It belongs to a woman named Amelia Vance, who 24 years ago made the most difficult decision of her life, to fake her own death to protect the family she loved more than her own existence." She told the complete story, the love between Ethan and Amelia, Thorne's threats, a mother's heroic sacrifice, the 23 years of separation, and the miracle of reunion that had begun with a simple observation about a ring in a London restaurant. "My mother taught me that true love sometimes requires sacrifices that seem impossible," Layla continued. "But she also taught me that those sacrifices are never in vain if they are made from pure love. The Amelia Foundation exists because a woman believed that protecting her family was more important than anything, including her own happiness." When she finished her speech, there wasn't a dry eye in the entire royal hall. The king himself approached Layla after the ceremony to personally congratulate her, telling her that in all his years of presenting awards, he had never heard a story that moved him more deeply. That night, at the luxury hotel where the family was staying, Layla began to feel the first contractions. David immediately arranged transport to the best hospital in Madrid, and a few hours later, surrounded by her complete family, Layla gave birth to a perfect baby boy. "What shall we name him?" David asked, holding his newborn son with hands trembling with emotion. Layla looked at her father, who had tears streaming down his face as he looked at his second grandchild. "Ethan Amelia Vance Hayes," she said without hesitation. "So he carries the names of the two people I love most in this world." Ethan approached to meet his grandson, and when the baby opened his eyes for the first time, Ethan would have sworn he saw a flash of recognition, as if Amelia's soul was somehow present in that small new life. "Hello, little Ethan," he whispered. "Welcome to a family that has been waiting for you for generations." Sophia, who had been patiently waiting her turn, approached the bed to meet her baby brother. "Is he going to make wines too?" she asked with the seriousness of a 3-year-old. "Someday," Layla replied. "But first, he's going to grow up listening to all our family stories. He's going to learn about the love that brought him here." Chapter 8. The Circle Complete. 5 years later, on a perfect spring morning, 4 generations of the Vance family gathered at the Stratford-upon-Avon Cemetery for the 10th anniversary of Amelia's death. Ethan, now 62 but more vital than ever, walked slowly holding the hand of his 5-year-old grandson, young Ethan. Layla, 33 and pregnant with her 3rd child, walked beside David, who carried Sophia. Now 8 and full of questions about everything, they stopped in front of Amelia's grave, which was now surrounded by beautiful flowers that bloomed all year round, planted and cared for by the local community who had adopted the family's story as their own. "Tell us again about great-grandma Amelia," little Ethan asked, looking at the headstone with curiosity. Layla knelt beside the grave and began to tell the story her children never tired of hearing. The story of a woman who had loved so much that she had been willing to give up everything to protect her family. As she spoke, a gentle breeze began to blow through the cemetery's cypress trees, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and something else, a feeling of peace and completeness that everyone felt simultaneously. "Can you hear her?" Sophia asked suddenly, interrupting the story. "Hear what, my love?" David asked. "The laughter. It sounds like music." Everyone fell silent, and indeed, in the wind whispering through the trees, something could be heard that sounded extraordinarily like musical laughter, full of joy and satisfaction. Ethan looked up at the perfect blue sky and smiled. "Yes, I hear it," he said softly. "It's your great-grandmother, telling us she's proud of the family we've built." "And is she happy?" little Ethan asked. "She's more than happy," his grandfather replied. "She's at peace, knowing that the love for which she sacrificed so much has grown and multiplied beyond what she ever dreamed possible." As the family returned to Vance Vineyards that afternoon, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the vineyards with golden hues that made the entire property seem blessed by divine light. In the distance, they could see the workers finishing the day's harvest, and beyond, the facilities of the Amelia Foundation, where dozens of women and children were building new lives with the help and love they had received. It was the perfect image of a legacy that had grown from the purest love to become a force that touched thousands of lives around the world. A family that had been separated by tragedy, reunited by destiny, and strengthened by the understanding that true love never dies. It only transforms and multiplies. Ethan again touched the ring he had worn for almost 3 decades. It no longer felt like a symbol of loss, but as a reminder that the best love stories are those that transcend even death, those that create circles of love that extend through generations. "Thank you, Amelia," he whispered to the stars shining over the vineyards, "for teaching us that true love always finds a way, for giving us a family that honors your memory every day, for showing us that the most beautiful endings sometimes are born from the most painful sacrifices." And in the night wind that whispered through the vines, Ethan was sure he could hear Amelia's voice one last time, carrying the words he had been waiting to hear for 24 years. "Love never ends, my dearest Ethan. It only transforms into something even more beautiful." The circle was complete. Love had triumphed, and the Vance family would continue to grow, loving and honoring the memory of the extraordinary woman who had made everything possible with a single act of unconditional love. Lesson learned. This epic tale teaches us the profound truth that true love, sacrifice, and family bonds are immeasurable treasures that transcend time, wealth, and even death. It shows us that courage in the face of adversity, like Amelia's selfless act, can create an enduring legacy of hope and support. Furthermore, it beautifully illustrates how purpose and fulfillment are often found not in accumulation, but in connection and in the act of giving back, as Ethan's journey reveals. The story is a powerful reminder that while life may present unimaginable challenges, the strength of love and the human spirit can ultimately lead to a profound and beautiful reunion, creating a ripple effect of kindness for generations to come. What part of Amelia's sacrifice resonated with you the most, and why? Share your thoughts below.